I threw myself into personal development work. I started reading books. I started listening to podcasts. I did everything. But I didn't just read the books and listen. I started embodying everything I was learning. Most people, they might listen to our conversation today and love it, but then not move forward with doing anything that we spoke about. It's important, if you want to change, you need to change. Everyone can change their life in an instant, but it's up to you. Sometimes we do have to work out, are we happy or are we not? Every day is a new time to begin again. You don't have to say, I've done 20 years and this is how I feel. The rest of my life is going to be like this. That burnout was always supposed to happen, and maybe there was a door there where either I choose to not do any inner work and ended up miserable, or I took the other door and I have a life now which I couldn't be happier.
Hi, everyone. My guest today is someone who knows firsthand what it takes to step out of your comfort zone and completely transform your life. Sarah Grynberg joins me, and she shares that she was a successful radio producer thriving on paper, but behind the scenes, she was burning out. It wasn't until she was forced out of her job that she actually realized she had been holding on to something that really no longer served her, simply because she was afraid of change. I can totally relate. And today, Sarah is the creator and host of the hugely popular podcast, A Life of Greatness, where she dives deep into personal development, spirituality, and what it really means to live a fulfilling life. In this episode, she shares how she went from being stuck in a cycle of stress and fear to embracing uncertainty and creating a career and a life that she loves. So if you've ever felt like you're meant for something more or just different, but aren't sure how to take that next step, this conversation is for you. Sarah offers real, tangible ways to shift your mindset, listen to your intuition, and start living with purpose. Welcome to the Gabby Reece Show. Let's go. So Sarah, welcome to the show. You are far from home.
Oh my God, Gabby. I've traveled 22 hours to see you. I did have a few other things I needed to do as well.
Yeah. So I thought I was sharing with you earlier that a lot of times, and you know this from your show, there's sort of like a flow to things, and you're going to talk to someone, especially if they're, science oriented or they have a specific message kind of in one specific message. Mm-hmm. And I thought with you, actually, because of your background of communicating with so many different types of people, that today I was going to approach it different and use you as a resource from your 30,000 foot view.
Amazing. I can't wait.
So you were just saying that the orchestration of shooting, you've been gone, you will have been gone for a couple of weeks.
Yes.
So I think for a lot of people, they want to try something different and new, and they're intimidated, or they have a grown-up job and they don't know how to go from one to the other. And you are a really good example of somebody who was doing something and doing it well. And I'm sure there was elements that were great, but you thought, oh no, I'm going to change and do something different. So you go from being a radio producer and to saying, no, I'm going to create a podcast that is hugely successful.
Yes.
So what is the thought process?
So the story was that I was obviously a radio producer, and that was hard. I was doing breakfast radio. I had two little ones at the time, a 2 and a 4-year-old, and I was literally getting up at 3:00 every morning to be able to, work out what's going on in the news, what's going on in sport, what's going on in entertainment. As the producer, you have to be there for the talent to be able to tell them everything that's like breaking whilst they were sleeping. It was full on. And I experienced burnout during that time because, it's just hard to wake up at 3 a.m. 5 mornings a week when you have little ones. I got the flu. I got really sick. And this is an interesting story because at that time, it wasn't actually my choice that I left that job, but it has been since with other jobs. I had no knowledge in personal development or, the way the mind-body connection works or how even happiness comes in life, that I stayed in this job that I hated. And through having this dark night of the soul where I was burnt out and I had the flu, and I thought to myself, I really need to get into doing something that's going to be able to propel me out of this horrible situation I'm in. I threw myself into personal development work. And when I say that, I started reading books, I started listening to podcasts, I did everything. But I didn't just read the books and listen. I started embodying everything I was learning. And that is a big point, because most people, they might listen to our conversation today and love it, but then not move forward with doing anything that we spoke about. It's important, if you want to change, you need to change. And knowing that, I did that. And so a few weeks after I started this personal development journey, I got a call from the head of, the person that was like head of the program that I was doing for the radio show. And he said, I want to meet you. And this was a kind of a weird situation. I was living in Melbourne, but we were recording a show that came out of Sydney because the talent were in Melbourne at the time. And he said, you've got to move to Sydney. And I thought to myself, as if, like, my whole family is in Melbourne and I'm not going to pull my kids out of school and all this kind of stuff, or kinder that they're in, and move to Sydney. It's just not going to happen. And he's like, well, if you don't do that, your job is redundant. And I thought to myself, Gabby, how is this possible? I've just gotten into personal development work. How have I now lost my job? This is not what they say in the books. Like, what's going on?
Right, you're manifesting in the wrong direction. Well, or not.
Yeah,
really.
Well, you know what it is. When you don't do something, the universe kicks you up the bum and will take it away from you to try and push you in the right direction. So I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. What's going to happen to me? This is a bizarre story, and it is a true story. I lay in bed that night really upset because I'd been at this company at the time for 7 years. It was like the biggest radio station in Australia. And I looked up at the ceiling, and I'm by no means a religious person at all. And I definitely had interest in spirituality, but I wasn't like all in. And I just said to myself in my head, or to a higher self of mine, like, I love working at this company, but I can't work these crazy hours, and I really want to work with talent that's nice. And I just want to be able to give back to the world and find a job that is fulfilling. Literally within 2 weeks, the head of the radio station calls me and says, we've got a new podcasting arm. It's been up for 6 months. Would you be interested in moving into it? There are these people called Hamish and Andy in Australia who are huge. They said you would be their producer. They're a comedy duo. They have the biggest podcast in Australia. So next minute I find myself as the executive producer of this huge podcast, working with the nicest people you could ever want to work with. And they said you can work 4 days a week from 9 till 4 because you've got 2 little kids. And I thought, Jesus Christ. These books and these podcasts about personal development, it works. Mm-hmm. Everything they're saying works. Within a few months, I came up with the idea of my podcast, A Life of Greatness. Why wouldn't I share with people what I had learned through my own experience? And then the rest is history. But going back to your initial question, yes, I was pushed out of that job, and I realized, okay, at that time, I was too scared to make the move myself. I was so miserable in that job. But because I was scared of change, I held on to it like no other until it was completely taken away from me. And then I was thrown into this situation where I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to have a job. Luckily, a job was found for me, and the rest is history. But then what else in life do we do where we're holding on so hard to something, even if we don't like it, because we're too scared to step into the unknown, right? Mm-hmm. Deepak Chopra says, when you step into the unknown, you step into the field of all possibilities. And I never forget that, because when we're in the known, it's the worn out repetition of the past. And so a lot of the time we're so miserable, but it's what we know, so we're comfortable in it. So to anyone listening, if you want to pursue another job, then obviously, you want to make sure you're set up to not just like jump from one thing to another, because that can be scary. But think about how you can make the next move. And if you want to get into podcasting, Maybe you start doing it on the side. Maybe you see if you can start building an audience. It's what I did. I was producing at the same time. And then it got to the stage where my podcast became big enough that I gave up all the producing and I focused on the podcast that I was hosting. And then all the doors started opening for the other things I do. So it was a crazy ride to be able to get to where I am.
This podcast has been brought to you by Bon Charge. Whether you're feeling like you want to up your skincare game with their red light face mask or even try their sauna blanket, which heats up in like 1 minute, Bon Charge has so many incredible products. Let's start with the red light face mask. I've been using it for 9 or 10 months and it really works. My skin has been looking so good. Why? Well, the Bon Charge red light face mask penetrates deep into the skin so it can boost your collagen production, reduce inflammation, and just kind of ease those signs of aging. And you really need to try it. So if you've been thinking about it right now, my listeners will get 15% off when you order from boncharge.com. And don't forget to use my exclusive promo code Gabby, Gabby at checkout. And this discount, it applies site-wide. So you've got to see their other products. I got some great headphones. That blanket I told you about, easy to clean, heats up in about a minute. You just head to boncharge.com. That's boncharge.com. Don't forget to use my promo code Gabby for 15% off your entire order. Plus, they will give you a 12-month warranty and free shipping at boncharge.com. And don't forget to use the code Gabby at checkout. This podcast has been brought to you by Puri. So I got introduced to Puri's O3 Ultra Pure Fish Oil, I guess about 4 or 5 months ago. I've been taking it ever since. I always take everything before I share it with you. And my thing is best in class, but if I'm going to direct you to something and you're going to put your resources, whether it's your time or your money, what's the best? Well, Puri, they think of everything. Let's start with the dosage. First of all, they offer a high dose of 2,000 milligrams long-chain omega-3 fatty acids. That's EPA and DHA in natural triglyceride form, so 80% omega-3 concentration. So they start off there with a high dosage. And then the second part is the quality. So every batch is third-party tested against more than 200 harmful contaminants. I know you must hear about fish oils, and they test against things like heavy metals, pesticides, and how they do it is you can scan the QR code that's on the bottle and you can see the test, that specific test for that specific batch. So it's not across the board. It's okay, this batch, here's the code, and every test result is published online for complete transparency, something that is really important. So if you want to do what I did and add Puri's O3 to your routine now, they have a great offer. All you have to do is go to puri.com/Gabby and they'll give you 20% off a one-time order. So that's puri.com/Gabby, PUORI.com/Gabby, Gabby at checkout. Or they'll give you their already discounted subscription, the discount with my code, and that's almost a third off the price. So it's only available when you visit puri.com/Gabby. Don't forget to use Gabby at checkout for either a one-time savings of 20% off, which is amazing, or more savings off their subscription at puri.com/Gabby. I think a lot of people experience it doesn't even have to be this threshold of misery. It's just, which is almost better because I think eventually that does kind of force change.
Yeah.
It's this medium place that we live a lot. Like my relationship's okay. The dynamic with my kids, and granted, kids go through their own times and seasons where it's not just up to you as a parent. Like they're involved too, right?
Absolutely.
So you have that part, but even sort of I don't want to say the passion that you approach it, but as you know, you have two children. Parenting is hard in a way that it can almost wear you down, and you can almost just get kind of medium.
Of course.
Because it's so hard to sort of survive. Like either you're tired, it's hard, you're worried about whatever the million things are. And so I think a lot of people are sitting in this kind of medium zone that flattens you out so much that it's so difficult to be in pursuit also. Like I experienced that in my own life. You just met Laird.
Oh, he's the best.
He is. But the other side of this is we can sort of lull ourselves to sleep and to death.
Yeah.
Or we have to be ready to have the energy to the best of our ability. Every day you go, I'm going to ask the questions and I'm going to show up. So, but there's no middle. So I feel like we have to almost choose and be like, all right, I'm going to go for it. And I know that sometimes that's to show up for real.
Absolutely.
Is exhausting, but it's not a death.
It's not a death. And, sometimes we do have to work out, are we happy or are we not? And every day is a new time to begin again. You don't have to say, I've done 20 years and this is how I feel. The rest of my life is going to be like this. Everyone can change their life in an instant, really, but it's up to you. And what do you need to be able to get there? What are the tools you need to be able to live a life that is fulfilling, serve others because that's going to make you happy, and have a home life that is happy as well? It's hard.
Yeah. And I think the home part, because again, these are different personalities that I was visiting with a friend yesterday, because I think it's natural. And when you have teenagers, you worry, especially as they get closer to going off on their own. And you sort of question, have you done a good enough job? Were you loving enough? Were you tough enough? All those, it's like always that way. Right. And he looked at me in my eyes and he said, sometimes I do a really good job also of almost it's not caring, but not worrying about. And I think as females and as moms, that's really hard to do.
It's so hard.
But I have found a lot of power when I get to a place where I see that it's worry, which doesn't really do anything. Yeah. I almost say, you have to say kind of F it.
Yeah.
Like they're going to be who they are and you have to, what are you doing? And so I'm wondering when you make the change, because to your point, people are told, quite frankly, hey, you have this routine, you do this life. To make this change, the outcome's going to be better. Are you willing to do it? They're not. They're more scared of doing it different, which I thought was wild. No, we just said it's going to be better. No, it's okay. I know this, I understand. So that point that you make, I think, is really important, that we are so afraid of that change. So for you, I know that there was a little bit of a press, but where did you go within yourself to sort of say, I'll ride this out. I'm willing to kind of see what happens?
Well, I was so unhappy, and everything, when you're unhappy, you're not a great person to be around, right? And things were crumbling around me. From the external, I looked great. I had this amazing job at the time. I was getting paid more money than I ever had. Wow, radio producer for like the breakfast radio show at the biggest network in Australia. This is amazing, schmoozing with like all these amazing talent. But inside, like I was broken. I couldn't show up for my husband. I couldn't show up for my kids. And I didn't want to be the person that was a misery guts. And yeah, I did this job, but then on the weekends, you don't want to hang around me. I didn't want to hang around me. And inside of me, I knew that I had more. I knew I was a good person, and I knew that I wanted to change my life in a way that I could be happy again. And then when I started diving into, I really enjoyed learning about the mind-body connection. I really enjoyed learning things like the law of attraction. That really lit me up. And like I said, I started embodying everything I was learning. And then I felt like I was a better person. This sounds so easy and basic, but even the idea, right, of conscious awareness, right? If you don't think about what you say, what you think, or how you show up in the world, your actions, how are you going to change anything? So the first thing is, how can I become more consciously aware? And something simple, like I was like, I'm not going to gossip anymore. Not that I gossiped a lot, but it was something that I did do in my past life. And I thought, I'm not going to do that anymore. Little things like that start making such a difference. And that was on my pursuit to making change. So it's very little. Okay, I said to someone, I'll do something. I'm going to do it. I'm going to be a person of my word. That's a conscious choice I'm making. Also, I might say I'm not going to do it, which is fine too. Saying no, but don't say you're going to do it and then don't do it. I find that with people now, and I find that very frustrating. So conscious awareness was a big part of this journey for me, and I think it's a big part of anyone who does personal development work. We can't change if we're not realizing what we're saying, what we're doing, and how we're showing up in the world.
I think the gossip one is an excellent little exercise.
Absolutely.
That people can do, because you know what happens too? I had a teacher once. I grew up in the Caribbean, but my junior and senior year, I was put into a Christian school. And the joke was I was the only, I'm going to just put it in quotes, unsaved person. Because, there's a process. I know, right? It was actually one of the best places for me to go.
Wow.
But when I went there, because I didn't have this relationship that was so organized.
Yes.
But the point is I went to the school and there was some of the finest people I've ever met that have had long-lasting impacts. Because when people, if this relationship with God, or for people have a million names for this energy, when I think it's sincere, it's all the good stuff.
Beautiful.
Right. So I had this Bible teacher who said, and we would go head to head on things for sure, is to the pure, all things are pure. And I thought, if I practice certain things, like you're saying, the non-gossip. So if you're trustworthy, then you believe that there's trustworthy people or safe people.
100%.
And so I think people don't realize how powerful just a little thing like not conveying bad stories or talking, smack about somebody. I do think there's a way to release a frustration about a person.
Totally.
And I think you pick one person that's not a gossiper.
Yeah. Like a best friend.
Yeah. And you just go, hey, listen, can I vent?
Yeah.
And I'm having this scenario and I had this reaction. So I'm not saying, hey, stuff in, don't be Pollyanna and be like, oh, okay, I'm sending love. We're human beings.
100%.
Right?
And you need to get things off your chest, right?
Right.
And get other opinions from someone you trust.
Right.
So totally.
Sometimes I think it's not the idea of, because you're doing it with the intention of resolving something, not going, can you believe it? And keeping that story going. And that is different. But I even have noticed, for example, if I say, I get to do a recording today with Sarah when I'm sharing with Laird my day, versus, oh, I have to do a podcast today. Those little things like you're talking about, I think are really powerful that we don't even realize. So I have a question is, in your family, was this stuff that was ever talked about, like growing up?
No, not at all.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So how were we were like doing this, and your partner, was everyone going like, what's going on?
So my parents, I adore them. They're unbelievable. I'm so close to them, but they're warriors. Like, it was so funny. Before I came to the States, my grandma, who bless her, is still alive. She just turned 93. She said, oh, I wish you're already on that plane on the way home. I said, what do you mean? She's like, I get so worried. And I said, don't worry. She goes, but that's what I do so well. And bless her, she's a lovely lady. And so a lot of us grow up with a family of warriors. I grew up with a family of warriors. They only do it because they love you. Like my mum, you're driving in the city. Yeah, mum, I'm driving in the city. Well, it's nighttime. Okay. Where are you going to park when you get to the restaurant? I said, Mum, there's going to be parking. It's fine. I just worry about you. Another story that I tell in my book is my late grandma, another one on my dad's side. My uncle rocked up one day. He'd bought a convertible car. This is years ago. She started crying because she thought my cousins would fall out of the car.
Wow.
It's ingrained in people, these worrying things. So I grew up around this. So I would worry about everything. Did I look at someone the wrong way? Are they mad at me now? Oh my God, I got this email. What did he mean by it? I can't sleep at night. Then I get to work. Everything's fine. Oh my God, I spent a whole night wide awake. So this was my upbringing, and that's all I knew. And when I started doing personal development work, I realized, why are you worried about this stuff? Think about it. Say for example, I remember this occasion. It was my daughter's birthday, and I'd work myself into a tears, like for the party and stuff. I got to do this, got to do that. And I thought, what would happen if I just didn't worry about it? It's so simple. like a change of the way that I looked at the situation. And I thought, why do I worry about it? And I didn't worry about it, and I had the best time. So when I started getting to this work, I think probably a lot of people looked at me like, what are you doing? No one said that to me, but I think they probably thought, wow, she's made a change. But it goes back to being your authentic self. This was inside of me. This was something that I really enjoyed. This was my new self. The old one had died. I mean, I still came in with the same personality to an extent, but I felt like almost I was reborn in the same life, and that was the most beautiful thing ever. And then I attracted so many wonderful people to me. I still have, friends that I've had since I was 14 years old. A lot of them are on this journey with me. And then in the meantime, I have made some of the best friends a girl could ever ask for.
Yeah.
So it's been a radical journey, and my parents watch me. They love it. Are they into this stuff? Not really.
I was going to ask
but that's okay.
If that vibration, how it impacted the immediate, so partnerships, children, and then if obviously your friends, but I'm always wondering if the bottom up learning, if your parents were ever able to receive any of this from you.
My mum definitely, she did. Dad, he's a doctor.
Oh yes.
He's a doctor.
Smart people really get in their own way sometimes.
Very science-minded. I mean, this is full of science, but, you know, it's not his sort of thing. He hasn't listened to any of my podcasts. My mum listens to every episode. My mother-in-law is very much into this stuff. My husband as well. And my children, this is the most beautiful thing in the world. They 100% have. So they're 9 and 11. And, of course, I teach them about the most gorgeous different things to do with the way that we're thinking, how we have strange feelings in our bodies, what do we do with it. I taught them about the law of attraction. I said, if you gossip about someone, you know that's going to come back to you. It might not be from the same person, but it'll be from someone else. And what does gossiping do? So they understand that. And my daughter said to me the other day, she was talking about someone, she goes, Mum, she gossips so much. And then she actually said, when she's at someone's house, she said, I noticed the mum, she's always gossiping, Sarah, Sarah to me. So I teach them, and it's great because they're young.
Yeah.
So they don't know much else. It's a beautiful thing to be able to give to other people, but in the same way, you can't force it.
No, and we always joke about, an expert is somebody who lives a mile away, and it's hard to be taken serious in your own village.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
Was there at that time, because I'm just thinking about someone who's even entertaining this idea, was there a specific book or person that you thought, oh, this really lands for me, this feels good, I'm going to try this? Was there anything like that kind of really opened you up?
Yeah, there was Deepak Chopra's book, The 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. I think it was one of his first books, New York Times bestseller. Actually, he wrote it on a plane from like America to Australia in like an hour and a half. The flight's much longer than that, but like, wow. I love that book, and it goes through all the laws, the law of detachment, law of reciprocity, all the different laws. Mm-hmm. And I actually even still, years later, because it is like an hour and a half if you listen to it on Audible and he narrates it, I go back and I listen to that book if I'm in a situation where I feel like, okay, I want to listen more about the law of detachment. I found that to be a great book. A guy called Jack Cornfield, who I've had on my podcast, he's amazing.
So good.
Yeah, he wrote this book called After the Ecstasy, the Laundry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then it's like, and then there's the laundry.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Right. So you get to the highest of highs and then the lowest of lows. But that's life, right? That's an excellent book. So I liked his stuff. Joe Dispenza's stuff is always very good. A lot of people like that for the mind-body connection, the science part of it, the spirituality part of it. So they'd probably be the main people. Oh, but also, I don't really read a lot of her stuff now, but back in the day, Louise Hay, her stuff, I mean, it's excellent, especially if you're just getting into this kind of work. Her books are phenomenal.
Yeah.
And Abraham Hicks, again, I don't listen to that anymore, but when I first started, what they write about in the law of attraction is very, very interesting.
So do you think to yourself, oh, I wonder, if you kept going on the path, maybe where you would be today?
There's this amazing, what is it, like a series on Apple at the moment. It's called Dark Matter. Have you watched it?
Mm-mm.
Okay, it's got Joel Edgerton in it. He's an Australian actor that I know. I think it's Jennifer Connelly who's the woman in it. She's amazing. It's all about these like sliding door moments, and it's the whole movie is based on quantum physics and the idea that within every moment we have a different door dependent on our vibration and the way that we're feeling. So our mood really is kind of vibration in a sense. And that due to that, there are different doors we can walk through. So it's very interesting, like I highly recommend it. But in answer to your question, I do think about that because I think of that different door and I wonder to myself, would there, when you open these doors and they can all be so different, would I have come to the same place I'm at now? Like, was that my destiny or was it not? And I often think that in life when we have these big changes, maybe it was. Maybe that burnout was always supposed to happen and maybe there was a door there where either I choose to not do any inner work and ended up maybe miserable and leading a life that was okay. Maybe I would have just done another producing role somewhere else and probably liked it to an extent but still had a chaotic mind. Or I took the other door and I have a life now which I couldn't be happier. When you give back in a personal development way, which you know a lot about, it fulfills you more than anything else that you could think of in life. When I had that job when I was the podcast producer for Hamish and Andy, that was amazing. It really was. But I knew that I needed to pursue my podcast and then, now I've written a book and public speaking and all the other things that I do because that fulfilled me more. And I would never have thought that because I hadn't been in a situation where I was doing something where I was really giving back to people. And like I said, that you would know about this, when you hear from people and they say, that podcast episode changed my life. Like I had a mother write to me not long ago saying she was at the hospital with her daughter who was, I think she was about 7 years old and she was dying. And she said, I listened to your podcast every single day whilst she was fading away. And it just gave me the strength to be able to move forward in my life. I mean, you know what? That's all that matters.
Yeah.
We're all here to walk each other home, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we can do that in any way possible,
yeah,
that's all that matters.
So that brings me to, I was thinking about with technology, because I always feel like I'm fumbling through, right? Like, coming from sports, moving into kind of performance, whatever. I hate the words health and fitness. We'll just say movement and trying to be a good human, healthy human. Marriage, parenting, friendship, business, whatever it is. I see a lot of people who are willing to sort of say, this is how you should do it. And I'm always, and I even feel like there might be areas I might even know more about than that person, but it would never occur to me to be like, this is how you should do it. And I find tonally that you are questioning more and sort of maybe hoping to invite people into their own conversation, internal conversation, versus being a guru.
Yes.
Because we live in a time right now where everyone is becoming a guru, and I'm only fascinated by it because I always think, I find it courageous that you could stand and say that you really kind of know, unless you're really specific.
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, I studied this, I went to school for this, and I can talk about that. That's fine. But we have also been presented with a lot of people who want to encourage people and tell them how to live. So
great question.
I appreciate the kind of, in a life of greatness, just the questioning.
It's really interesting. And I think about this a lot to do with like research, knowledge. I always say to people, don't just follow one person, right? Don't just follow me. I don't have the answers to everything. And on your podcast, on my podcast, I have a whole range of people. Do I, follow every single thing that person's saying? Absolutely not. But there might be snippets that I take out of it that I go, yeah, that resonated. That didn't really resonate. Might be snippets where I don't think anything resonated, but the next person there is. But if you're just constantly following one person, you're missing out on so much, right?
Yeah.
And also be aware. Like just because someone says that doesn't mean it's the truth. How do they know?
Yeah.
Okay, yes, like you mentioned, in some things, okay, there might be a science thing. They know totally about this area and that we know is right. A lot of the time, sometimes we then find out in a few years' time it isn't. And it's another thing, as you would know through the work that you do a lot with nutrition and food and stuff, it's forever changing. I mean, my mind's going 100 miles an hour. Do I eat vegetarian? Do I eat more protein? Like I'm so confused. But I'm speaking to people and listening and finding out, okay, that resonated. I might do a bit of this person, a bit of that person, a bit of that person. You need to always be curious and you need to be constantly educating yourself with different thought leaders and different podcasts, different books. That's the best way to be.
I think so. And I think
no one has all the answers.
No. And what did they say even in the universe? It's sort of like there's only half truths really, to everything. And what I always hope that people do is you talked about that signal, that antenna, that intention, that when that's dusted off and pretty clear, that means also you're able to receive the stuff you're supposed to receive. I think that signal, it sort of works better also in like, oh, wait, that was a truth for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And so I see that in your podcast. And also I want to say, you have really good guests on your podcast. And I wondered if it was you as with your producer hat to sort of have the courage to ask whoever you want.
Yeah. Everyone always asks me about that, especially since I've been in the States. They're like, how do you have these people on? Firstly, it is definitely a producer hat.
Well, first of all, you have a good podcast with good numbers. Yeah. So let's get rudimentary. But I still think when I see it, it reeks of... mix of... Well, not only that, but you're just like, oh, I'm going to call them and I'm going to ask them. And it's okay if it's Dr. Attia or Huberman or whoever, let's drop whatever name we want to, that you're just like, okay.
Well, I mean, what do you have to lose? I got the best advice, right? My best friend is in sales.
Oh,
and
God.
she's like as a radio salesperson, one of the best in Australia. And she said to me when I started the podcast, she goes, you know what? Just put out as many feelers as you can, so many that you don't even remember who you've reached out to. You get so numb with the rejections that when you get the people coming back saying yes, you're like, oh, yeah, okay, I forgot I even asked you. It doesn't matter. She goes, that's what we learn in sales. And it was the best advice I could have ever have had, where I just started, in the first season, I didn't have a name, right? But I managed to get a few big people in the first season. That was, who knows, just luck, I suppose, more than luck. It was supposed to be. And then it just grew and grew from there. But basically, if I like someone now, I just ask them to come on. If they say no, then so be it. But more times they'll say yes than they say no now. So it is what it is. But you might have to pursue someone for a period of time as well. So they might, like Peter Attia, that took a little while to get up, but then it did. And that's okay, because I always believe in divine timing. I mean, Huberman, it was when he came to Australia, so that was perfect. And then we got to do it face to face, and he was brilliant. So it just has to, it has to work out for them as much as it works out for me. And then if it's meant to be, it's meant to be.
But you have this gentle tone about you. Yeah. But I thought to myself, oh, this is an incredible mix, because this is somebody who just will ask.
Yeah.
And whether it's for podcast guests or for a raise or for a date, people are afraid to ask.
I used to be afraid.
You are?
Yeah, I used to be afraid But then I realized
You mean for your own show?
for just general in life, I didn't want to be rejected. Like I wouldn't put myself out there because then I'd think, oh my God, they don't like me, da-da-da. It makes me feel shit. Well, it's better I don't ask than I ask and get rejected. Now it's like, whatever. Everyone's got their stuff.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, whether it is the date or the raise or the guest, they're just people.
Yeah. And what have you got to lose, right?
Right.
What have you got to lose? You do the inner work and you have a center of happiness. You know that you love yourself. You have a great group of people around you. Someone, rejects you on a date or says they don't want to come, or you ask for the raise and you don't get it. That's okay. But at least you asked. Because if you don't ask, how will you ever know? You'd rather not live your life with regrets.
Yeah. Yeah, I think.
Are you good like that?
Yeah, you'd be surprised. I'm probably more, it's hard for me to ask. It's very interesting. Yeah, because I have this weird thing I'm always navigating of, I don't want to infringe on people. It's weird. Like I'm here to make them look good and learn about them. But, I know, especially if I know them, I know how busy they are. I know how many asks they get. And Laird always gives me a hard time about it. Or the fact that, I've developed a few different skill sets over time.
Yeah.
And so, I've been interviewing people since 1992.
Wow.
Right. First it was in columns, writing, and television. Then it's changed. And sometimes it's like, I don't want to take full ownership of whatever small amount of skill I've developed in this space. I kind of go like, oh, yeah. But so I think it's got to be a blend. I love the idea of humble expectation, because I think you need to say, no, I would like this to come my way, or I want to talk to this person, or I'm going to stick my neck out there and say, hey, this is something I want to do.
Yeah.
But it is interesting, but I certainly less and less, but it's more, my thing is more, I know someone's busy. And then I look and I think, oh, come on, get on with it. I have college students asked to interview myself or Laird. And if they're on message, if they have 12 followers, I will find a window for them.
Really?
100%.
Oh,
no, because you realize that's what are people paying attention to? If they're only paying attention to, okay, do you have modern wisdom numbers or Rogan numbers or whatever? Maybe you don't want to talk to them if it's that strategic.
Totally.
So anyway, so it's a mix.
I think that's beautiful though.
So you have this book. By the time someone's listening to it, either it will be available for pre-order or it will be out. Yeah. We're deciding that. A Life of Greatness. So did you think, I'm ready, because this is a whole other kind of project to take on. So what was the impetus for thinking, I'm ready to share all of this? So
a lot of my listeners are, do you have a book? Do you have a book? And I was like, no, I don't have a book. Maybe I should write a book. And I started putting a proposal together. And as things happen, then I get an email from a publisher saying, would you ever think about writing a book? We'd be really interested in helping you if you want to write a book. We'd love to, put a book of yours out into the market. So kind of the rest is history. I mean, I put the proposal out and I got the appropriate publisher for it. And the writing experience has been amazing, because the book is made up of stories about my life and what I believe people need to know about living a life of greatness. So the book is Living a Life of Greatness, Steps to a Fulfilling Existence. And each chapter is made up of, different things, like we were talking about, the stories we tell ourselves. Conscious awareness is a chapter, meditation, breathing is a big chapter. What have been the things that have changed my life that I feel other people could use in their life? And one of the big themes of the book is we've got everything we need inside of us. We don't always need to get all this other stuff. But because of life, some things that big flame that we had slowly starts to dim a lot. So it might be words that people say to us, dreams that our parents say that we wouldn't be able to do, or we should go and do a different job, not what we really wanted to pursue. And so slowly, this light gets smaller and smaller until we find ourselves in the situation I was in, when you're completely burnt out and you're like, I am so unhappy, but everything on the surface looks so good. And so what do you need to be able to get yourself back to the level of happiness again? And the book goes through that. One thing that I think you'll find really interesting, especially in the work that you do, and it's a chapter in the book, is the power of your breath. Mm-hmm. And I tell a story about how for some reason I developed this fear of flying. I don't know where it came, and I would feel very claustrophobic on a plane. It wasn't that I thought the plane would crash.
Oh.
It was just the idea that I couldn't get off the plane.
Was this after children?
Before.
Okay. Oh.
So before kids. I kind of came in uni days. So I was like, every time I would get on a plane, my heart would start going into like full boom, 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 and feeling like I'm going to have a panic attack. I'd never had a panic attack outside of being on a plane. I don't really get a lot of anxiety. Every time I would be sitting there waiting to board the plane, it would just, and then you'd be on the plane and it would just come at you and then it would go. But it was a horrible feeling. And then I felt a lot better if I knew there was someone on the plane with me. So if I knew I had a friend or my partner or whoever, even my kids, anyone with me, I felt better. I would never have been able to come to America by myself, which I have done, on a plane. I mean, that's 22 hours of flying. The fact that I got here was because I learned how to control my breathing. It was life-changing for me. So one day I was taught about box breathing. Take, for me, 4 breaths in, hold for 4, and then out for 4, and then release for 4. And then you do it over and over and over. How is this easy peasy technique life-changing for me? And so we go all into that and all the other different pieces about breathing in the book, because had I not been able to get on a plane by myself, this would never have come to be, all the other opportunities I've had.
Yeah.
It's just, it's bizarre how these little things can make such a difference in your life. And that's for anxiety as well, not just, being on a plane and having panic attacks.
Do you think obviously you have the physiological going into your parasympathetic, so down-regulating, but was it also that you had something to do? So you go, oh, when I feel like this, I actually have
the focus.
Because sometimes I feel like it's so helpful to have these tools of, if this starts to happen, go over here. Because otherwise you're just free falling.
Yes.
So do you think it was as much that you had something really concrete, okay, 4, 4, 4, 4 to do, as it was that, of course, it's down regulating
100%. Because I was taught, just distract yourself. Well, my heart's still beating at 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I'm trying to listen to music, do meditation. I do meditation. I feel my heart beating out of my chest.
Yeah.
I was like, this is not working. You can
focus on that.
Yeah, this is not working for me. I even tried hypnotherapy. That didn't work.
Interesting.
So I definitely think it is that. And also knowing, oh my God, no one can take my breath away from me.
Well, that's just the thing that I think is important. Not only is it free, and you can do it anywhere, but it's important not to overlook the value, because it seems too simple. I think people discard the power, the people who haven't really practiced it or given it a go. And so I really do appreciate that, because sometimes when it seems just so easy, people don't give it a value. If it was elaborate and it's like, okay, do this and do that, and then you're going to make an appointment and see this guy, you'd be like, oh, this must be real. People don't understand how real this is. It's
so real. And I use it a lot as well for public speaking, which might be helpful for a lot of people. When I'm doing a big keynote speech, start breathing. When I'm backstage, getting my heart rate down, and then I go on there and I feel great. I mean, this can be used for everything. Mm-hmm. Do you use it in your life?
I do, because I'm not great at meditating.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of kind of personal checking in, but I'll just go like, have you been breathing deep? Even if it's just noticing that my breath only got to my chest for the last hour. It's like, hey, you might want to just bring it down. A great cue that has always helped me, that we have used a lot with XPT, is, okay, women are told to suck it in and hold it in. If you're actually super fit, like there's a lot of people who are real fit and ripped, well, they're tight. And so it's a funny thing. So I always say to people, they can practice it laying down. If you breathe through your nose and you can't get the breath down into the belly, I used to just stick my belly out simultaneously. So I'd breathe in through my nose and just push my belly out, because then I'd be like, oh, there it is. And I could connect my nose to my diaphragm.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, you want to bring the breath up in the second part and then bring it up around, in the chest. So it isn't about like, well, I can't even get down there. Most people can. It's okay. Because most people can only take that shallow breath that only makes you more stressed out. So people can practice laying down the floor. I just go, hey, just soften your belly. And when you inhale through your nose or your mouth, but preferably in the beginning and through your nose, just put your finger on your belly and practice sticking it out. So then you go, oh, there's my diaphragm. So that was very helpful. But certainly, yeah, I use the breath as a real tool, and doing certain training really gets your relationship with that, because you're like, oh, I need to recover. I need to calm down.
Totally.
I need to ramp up. And you said something about the public speaking that I want to remind people. Sometimes we do things in life. You have a meeting, you have an uncomfortable conversation. You're going to publicly speak, which is to a lot of people the scariest thing there is.
People find that scarier than dying.
Right. Is you're actually feeling the way you should to be getting ready for that situation. So it's not like, oh, I feel so nervous, I'm about to go on stage. It's like, no, it can be nervous excitement, because you're getting ready to go do something that actually is the way you should feel.
Yeah.
You shouldn't feel like you're going to sit on the couch and watch a movie. And so we get so scared with those uncomfortable feelings.
It's like you got to lean into it.
Yeah, and the way that works for you. Because some people, if you're high strung, you got to lean into it in the way that, like, you're talking about relaxing. If you're, so whatever that is. So I just want to bring that up.
It's the way that you think about it, which is exactly what you're saying. I heard Bruce Springsteen talking about that too, that he would get really nervous before he went on stage. And he had a different relationship. He changed his relationship to anxiety and to having like a bit of panic before he went on stage. And as soon as he did that, he embraced it. Yeah. And I say to my daughter, she does a lot of singing, I say it's all right to have these butterflies. They'll actually make you sing better, So that is a beautiful point. I'm happy you brought that up.
It's so important. So all of these conversations that you've had, was there anyone you were nervous to interview?
I have been asked that before. I don't think nervous, like excited.
Yeah.
Like I was excited when I interviewed Huberman.
Yeah.
And especially because it was face to face.
Yeah.
So I was very excited for that. Yes, there was one interview that I was nervous for. It was the former Prime Minister of Australia. His name's John Howard, and he was our second longest standing Prime Minister. And he was the Prime Minister when I was a little girl. And I adored him. And I just felt like it was such an honor that he chose like a lifestyle podcast, my podcast, to come on. When he released his book, he did all news podcasts and mine. And I got a whole hour to talk to him. He's, in his 80s now. And it was I just thought to myself, wow, I feel like this is like the little Sarah, someone that she watched on TV her whole life, the leader of our country. And now I'm sitting with him for an hour. How lucky am I? So there was some butterflies.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I know you worked as a producer and you were around a lot of talent. How did you go about sort of developing your style and your craft in doing this, and also trusting yourself? Because the thing is, we cannot be all things.
100%.
And I think we can be. I have a good friend who says this a lot, and I really appreciate this. Our work should be better than us, right? We're just portals for something. It's not us. And he always says, your work should be greater than yourself. But at the same time, you should bring who you are, because your listeners listen because of you. Yeah. And I'm sure on the day Huberman's on, they're like, yay, great. Yeah. But it's still, it's got to be about you.
Yeah.
So what's that fine line of developing the skill, which is strategic, but then staying authentic and trusting that you're going to do it your way and that will be good enough? Yeah,
that's such a beautiful question, because authenticity, it's a whole chapter in the book. Yeah. It is a big deal. And when I was a producer, I noticed that the talent liked me because I was matter of fact. It's the way my mum is. It's the way I am. I don't bullshit people. I'll be authentic. I always tell the truth, and I'm a person of my word. And when I was doing these interviews, you know, I look up to a lot of different interviewers and I think they're amazing for their craft. I love Oprah. I love Louis Theroux. Like, there are that many amazing interviewers out there. There's a lady I interviewed. She's Australian, 60 Minutes, Liz Hayes. Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But I was me, and I was a good listener. I've always been a great listener from a young age. People would always open up to me and tell me random things that they've never told people before, and it's because I listened. So when I started this podcast, I started interviewing people and they started opening up and saying, I've never shared this before, I've never told this before. And people started saying, you're really good at this. But it felt very natural to me. And I wasn't trying to be someone else. You know, I listened to Oprah say one day when she started out as a TV presenter, all she wanted to be was Barbara Walters. She loved Barbara Walters. So she analysed Barbara Walters. She sat like Barbara Walters. She did her hair like Barbara Walters, and she tried and speak like Barbara Walters. And then one day, I think it was Gail, her friend, said, enough with trying to be Barbara Walters. Just be Oprah. Well, look how that did for her.
Yeah, sure.
Clearly well.
Yeah.
So I just showed up as myself. I don't pretend to be anyone I'm not. I don't need to be the smartest person in the room, but I make sure that I sit there and I have done my research on the person. I know everything about them before I get on that call or, you know, face-to-face interview with them. And I'll stump them with questions they've never been asked before because I've done amazing research on them. And I've got good EQ. So I can read a person, I can look at their eyes, I can look at their body language, and I just feel them. So I think doing that and honing in on those skills have made me good at my job. And I think anyone that's listening that wants to show up in any job, don't be scared to be yourself. You know, being a chameleon in life is a hard game to keep doing. And then you think to yourself, they wouldn't like me if I wasn't this. That's not true. Just be your authentic self.
Yeah. And you also said something that's really important. You're saying be your authentic self and be prepared.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah.
Because I think people think, oh, I'm going to show up. It's like, And if it entails a certain amount of work, do the preparation, do the work. And I don't mean interviewing people, whatever that looks like, because I think those two things coupled together are really a powerful combination.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I said to my daughter, she's young and she just wants to be Taylor Swift, right? I mean, what 9-year-old doesn't?
Right.
And I'm like, she's a great singer. She's a good dancer. I'm like, you don't need to be Taylor Swift. You need to be poppy, but be good at your craft. Don't just follow what Taylor's doing, but don't practice. You got to keep doing your singing lessons. You got to keep practicing your dancing. Taylor was good because she practiced a lot. I'm a good interviewer because I do a lot of research and I also know what's going on in the world. So I'm doing a lot to be able to get to where I am, and anything that anyone is pursuing, go for it, but be good at your craft. You need to try. You need to develop the skills. Look at other people who are in that area and look at what they've done. You know, there's this beautiful quote that says that it's very hard to do what you need to unless you can see that someone else has pursued that route, right? Yeah. So look at people who are in that area and see what they have done and then follow that, but do it in your own way.
Yeah, I think that's important because that, you know, by the time you copy, it's already been done. And so just to trust that your little way, that special, different way you do it will make it what's interesting.
Yeah.
You work a lot and you have a family and you share, you know, you talk about how you can kind of switch and you'll be conscious of, okay, now I'm with the kids. And I think for a lot of working people, never mind just mothers, just people who their work, and now with the telephone and technology, it just bleeds right into our house. Yeah. It's with us all the time. Before there was sort of this location that work sort of stayed at. What ways have you sort of said, okay, I'm unplugging here and now I'm with my family, even if something big is on the horizon.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm not going to lie. It's such a hard thing to juggle. Really, it is. And there are points where I'm like, oh my God, I forgot that they had this thing at school and I'm scrambling. Oh my goodness, this and that. But with time, because I'm very good with my job, like I know what's going on. I've got producers as well, but I'm all over that like a rash. When it comes to my family life, that's a little bit more chaotic. But in saying that, I've thought about it a lot over the last few years. And there are little things that I do. When I'm around my kids, I do not have my phone on me. I make sure that the time that I'm with them, which I'm not with them a lot of the time, but the time that I am, that I'm completely focused on them. And it's unrealistic to think it's going to be a 50-50 split. Like really, when we're working and most people have to work these days. It's so hard. Like I think it's similar in the States, but in Australia, people are just trying to make ends meet.
Yeah.
They can't pay their mortgages. The price of food is so high at the moment.
Same, yeah.
So we need to work just to be able to survive, to be able to put food on the table, to be able to live in the apartment or house or whatever it is that we live in. So a lot of our hours are going there. But when you do have that time on the weekend or that time at nighttime, put your child to bed, read them a story, or if they're older, talk to them about their day. When you're having a meal together, make sure that you don't have your phones around you. Put your phones away. All these things are so unbelievably important and they don't take a lot to do. But when you're with someone, be with them. And that goes for family as well. So that's what I try and do. Am I perfect? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know that my kids are looking at me and they see me following my dreams, and that's more important than anything. Because it was interesting. I heard this mindset coach say that the worst thing you can do for a child is not follow your own dreams.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, well,
people always ask
that's
me.
what I'm doing.
No, it's very true. And
it was Ed Milet who said that.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
That's so funny. And I don't, again, sometimes I parse things out like as the mom, as the dad, but that's because it's different roles and people can say it's the same. It's not the same. And I really feel, I always say, how can we as moms keep our fire, our little flame, our personal flame alive, especially when the children are very young. And as they become more independent and older, you can blow on that fire a little more because nobody's going to do that for us. Mm-hmm. They're not. It's on us to defend this dream, this mission, whatever it is. And it is really so powerful for your children to see that, because if we don't do it, we don't have anyone to blame but ourselves.
No.
And I think sometimes we do get into so much service, which is great, but that it's hard to also do that.
Of course. And when my kids were young, it takes up so much energy. You have to do everything for them. Of course, they're little.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to be there for them too.
Absolutely.
And as mothers, we yearn for that.
That's the thing. It's not even that they, are demanding it, or let's say it's that you think this is the only time they're going to be like this. People have asked me a lot because of Laird's type of surfing, which is, can be perceived as pretty dangerous. Oh, well, did he stop surfing after the girls? And Laird said, the worst thing I could do is abandon my passions and then say to them, yeah, well, I used to surf and then you guys were born and then, I didn't do that anymore. It's like, it's this weird thing of being in pursuit. And I think that's such an important, thing to remember, that we can be good parents and still be in personal pursuit. It's hard.
It's hard.
But
it can be done.
If you have something. So you have talked to so many people, and this is where I thought that you would be such an interesting person to ask just these questions. I thought you'd be a really good person to sort of ask for you in these buckets that show up. So for example, some of the most important values or practices that showed up for you in health. From all the conversations you've had and just the dabbling that you've done, what were the things that really stayed tried and true for you?
I think one of the biggest things is that there is a mind-body connection. I think you would have to be mad to think that if you just looked after your body and not your mind, that you're going to live a perfectly happy life. And I interviewed this guy, Jeffrey Rediger. Have you heard of him? He wrote the book Cure, and he talks a lot about spontaneous remissions. I've had him on a couple of times. It was fascinating what he spoke about. People with, terminal diseases realizing that if they made these changes in their diet, but mostly through their mind and through pursuing, any grievances that they had, putting those grievances to rest, then they were able to ward off illness. And of course, does it happen every time? No. But we understand that everything is connected. And that just blew me away, that it wasn't just if you eat well, then, you'll be healthy. It's like if your mind is well and if you eat well and if you do exercise, then you can live a happy and fulfilling life. But you've got to get the mind bit sorted first. You really do. I think that was the biggest takeaway for me in regards to health. Even I spoke to Olivia Newton-John about a year before she passed, and she's just, an amazing, amazing person. And she said to me, I never say that, I never talk about the cancer, or I never talk about I've got this terrible illness within me. And the way that she was doing that self-talk or using, her experience, the way that we spoke about it, it wasn't like I'm suffering, it's ravishing my body, all these kind of things. And I really truly believe that allowed her to live for years and years longer than maybe she would have. She had cancer for years. So all these things are so interesting to me. And I thank God that I've been able to learn them and now be able to show them up to other people so they can learn them too.
So it's funny because I talk about from the meathead side, right?
Yeah.
That I have used exercise and movement to be able to tackle some of the, when you're talking about grievances and personal things, just being able to use that one level of, is it a temporary homeostasis to then try to get a hold of my mind?
Yeah.
And it feels like you have said, I'm going to get these perspectives first and then move into the other side of the practice. And I that's why I think it's important, because you have people who have my kind of experience, which is I came through sport and I dealt through all my childhood stuff and whatever else through trying to feel as good as I could to get myself in the position mentally to then make these different choices, to be like, you know what, life is short and I love this person and they did the best they could. Or if I was them, that's exactly what I would do. Whatever the million things that we learn how to take on, or I'm not going to gossip, whatever. And it feels like which I actually think probably more people would relate to, you're sort of engineering it the other way.
Yeah. I've always done the mind first, because if my mind's all over the place, then there's probably no luck that I'm going to go out and do that exercise. And that's just my personal experience, because obviously everyone's different. And since it's been like that, then I pursue those other areas of exercise. I've always been a generally very healthy person. I know a lot about food. I understand that food doesn't just fuel your body, it fuels your brain. That's a big thing I'm teaching my kids at the moment. Really, you make these choices, but it's not about gaining weight or getting pimples. It's about how is your body processing this food and how is it fueling you in your everyday. So, all of those things are so interesting to me, but it is that mind piece for me that I had to get right first, and then everything else kind of flowed through.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's why I'm glad to bring it up, because it's just all
it's different for everyone.
And that's it. Is getting people to understand we don't have to all do it the same way. And sometimes the information, it's is it this way? Is it that way? No, it is the way that works for you. But you still got to, do it. And
it doesn't always need to be, I love that, so technical. So you know how some people, they'll listen to an episode and they might write into you and say, oh, he said this, but then what about that? Da. It does, if you don't follow it exact, it's still going to be okay.
Yeah.
So sometimes you don't need to do everything 100% the way that someone was saying, but just get a bit of an idea of what they're talking about and do it in the Gabby way, do it in the Sarah way, do it in the Sophie way, whatever suits you and what's going on for you at that time. That's very important.
Yeah.
You know, not everyone can do exercise 7 days a week, right? How do you fit that into your schedule? Some people can. And if you don't, that is okay.
Yes. And I think if you're going to do anything for a long time, which is we're hoping people take care of themselves until they move on to the next place, you have to be realistic.
Absolutely.
You know, you can't say, well, I measured this and I had this many grams of protein and that many calories. It's like, oh my God,
fun.
It's going to be 5 years, you know. So what for you has shown up as an interesting or helpful lesson in marriage, one that you've personally learned, and then maybe one that someone shared on your show with you? Something about relating to a partner that you couldn't have known either going through it or until somebody shed light on it.
Yeah. I think for my own experience in partnership, it's allowing both of you to have a dream and being happy for the other person and allowing them to pursue it in any way possible. I mean, I'm in America for 2 weeks by myself. My husband's looking after my 2 kids. He works full-time too. That's not easy if he didn't want to say, okay, I'm going to have to take a bit of the load on for the next 2 weeks to be able to let Sarah do what she needs to. And I feel so grateful for that. As the same way I would for him. He works late sometimes. That's fine. You know, I pick up the slack and do whatever, but we both put in. We both do the washing. We both do the cooking. We both do this. We both do that. It's not just like I'm the woman, he's the man, and these are the roles that we need to do. Not at all. And also what's been really good was we've been on a similar path. So we're both very into this mind-body connection, this whole piece around mindset. We're into lifestyle, you know, eating well, doing exercise, all that kind of stuff. That has made it a very good marriage. And I think when people are kind of not aligned in that, not saying it's not going to work. So I get a lot of emails from people saying, help. I got into personal development work and my partner's not into it. And now I feel unaligned and da. And as we said earlier, you know, you can't make someone do something that they don't want to do, right? But you can show them in the sense that you be you. And then if they're interested, they'll see what you're doing and they might want to follow, right?
Yeah, that's your best shot anyway.
Be the example, but don't force it upon them.
No.
And as far as relationship advice on the podcast, I mean, I had Esther Perel on a few years ago, and I mean, you know, she's just the most amazing speaker and educator in this realm. And she said a lot of very interesting things on the podcast, but I mean, this was just information that she gave, but
sometimes she's a scientist and then sometimes I find her very French. You know,
totally.
like about relationships, like it's an interesting mix for me when I hear her, because it's like it's so like sciencey and study, and then sometimes she says a comment and I'm like, oh, that's so French. You know?
I know, she's amazing. That accent is like next level.
Well, it's like goes have sex, don't have sex, whatever. You know, you're just like, what? You know.
On that, she said on my podcast, and I just never thought about this before. I said to her, do people have to have sex to be able to have a good relationship? And I was thinking she'd say 100%. You should have it this many times a week, yada, yada. She said, not for everybody.
I think it's like contact, right?
Yes,
so you have to have touch.
You have to have touch.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, wow, she goes, you know, 2 people can be in a relationship and not have sex, but as long as they touch each other. And she said, even if they've got a dog and they touch the dog, it's having some form of touch in your life. And I just thought that was really interesting because I'd really never thought about that
when
before.
I hear that, I wonder if she asked the man.
Totally.
The wife's like, no problem. I touched the dog. And the husband's like,
hello. So I'm patting my dog every day. 10 pats a day. I'm getting my pats in. Who cares about steps?
I'm sorry, but when I hear that,
it sounds weird, like, doesn't it?
No, it's not only that. I'm like, did anyone interview the male partner?
So true. But wow, I never knew that.
No, right. And
fascinating information.
It is funny.
Touch is a big thing, though.
Of course. That's what we're, you know, as humans, conflict resolution or sort of needing to kind of have some of the hard conversations. The way you entered your relationship versus now, is there anything you do different that has really been effective, to help you guys? Because I think that's important that we get better at that.
Yes, absolutely. Look, I am always a person that, it's so weird to say I'm a confrontational person because then it sounds horrible. Like,
no, it's
I'll
great.
confront you.
It's great.
But that's just my personality, that matter-of-fact personality. If I'm stirring on something or if I need help in something, I'm pursuing every angle to be able to get that, right? It's just, that's who I am. So if I've got a problem in a relationship, be it my partner or a friend or whatever it is, I will say, if it's appropriate, because sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not big enough. You don't want to make a big deal about everything. That's a big one too, because then you're just always making an issue. And sometimes you don't need to make an issue about something. Okay, that happened. Deal with it. Move on. Making the issue can be worse. But when it comes to relationships, if I feel that there is something that's really troubling me, then I bring it up. Over time, I've learned maybe use my words a little bit nicer than what I generally have in the past. Because I am a matter-of-fact person, so I can come in hard and I don't realize, like my husband will say to me, I'll say, I was talking to someone and then I said X, Y, and Z. And he goes, well, I know you. How were you speaking to them? Because sometimes you can be a little bit forthright when you say things. So over time, I've known now to kind of take it back a few steps, because I don't mean any harm,
right.
But sometimes you forget the way that you're saying things can be a little full on. So really with him as well, I've noticed tone, the way that I say what I'm saying, to make sure I'm not only just getting my point across and that we can deal with this, but I'm doing it in a way that is caring for both myself and him. And that goes with any relationship that you can have. Because why would you want to stir on things? It's just, I don't want sleepless nights because I'm too scared of bringing something up. Yeah. So I go past that fear, and we do have a very open relationship in the way that we talk to each other about anything we feel that might not be working well or any issues we might have.
I think it's really important because what I learned the hard way is in the beginning part of my relationship, because I never learned how to have, you said your mom was confrontational. Yeah. It just means direct.
Yeah, direct.
Great.
Exactly.
I didn't really learn that. So I would just more wall up and just be kind of stoic. And I didn't learn about this being loving and healthy, this direct kind of conversations. So I didn't really say stuff for like maybe the first 5 years of my marriage. And what you learn is you will get there anyway. And it will be a lot harder and harder to untangle and not probably as nice as if you just kind of do it all along the way.
Yeah.
And hopefully your partner learns to understand you're coming from this place of love, that you want to be closer and more intimate.
Absolutely.
But I think a lot of us are scared, like, oh, I'm not going to say anything. And I do appreciate that, like, you have this kind of sweet loveliness about you, but that you're throwing zingers. But
I
it's
want to tell you something interesting about that I thought about the other day, because I lived in this environment where everyone just said, like, that's how it is. And I told you I was very matter of fact. I remember when I got to about 14 years old and I made some friends outside of the school that I went to. And I didn't understand what talking behind your back meant, because I thought if you just don't like someone, then you just don't, communicate with them, or it is what it is. But you wouldn't pretend to like someone if you really didn't like them. When I saw people bitching behind people's backs, that was a whole new world for me, because I didn't understand what that meant, because that's not the way that I was brought up. And I think that was so interesting, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's why, for me, just be a person of your word. Yeah. If you don't like someone, then why would you be a certain way and then say terrible things behind their back? Just don't have anything to do with them.
Right. But you're also not afraid, or you're not trying to make people like you.
No.
And I think a lot of people get into situations where they're trying to make everyone around them favor them. And we know that that's not possible. Yeah. So I really appreciate that. But I will reemphasize that it is better in whatever way you can to get it out there, because through time, no matter what, it will come up.
Absolutely.
And you won't forget all the 15 things because it's been so long that really were the real issues. And then all of a sudden everyone's in their separate corners.
And you don't want it to explode.
You don't. I've been there. I have been there.
That's a shocking thing for both of you.
Yeah.
So, you don't want to get to a situation where it was one thing and then it's a whole lot of other things.
Yeah.
And then, that can ruin marriages.
It can. What about because again, you have such a wide variety of guests. Was there anything, I know you have a exercise life-ish.
Yeah.
But let's say it's actually more helpful for people. More people probably live closer to how you live than how I live in this realm, right? So what has shown up for you in fitness or something you heard that you thought, oh, this is worth taking with me?
It's interesting you say that because I just made a change recently after I interviewed Andy Galpin on my podcast. And I thought, I do 3 sessions with a personal trainer, and actually they're all different personal trainers, but at the same gym, because the times worked out that it was like this one on this date, and they're all amazing. But I was doing 2 sessions a week for 45 minutes of weights, and I love weights. Really, I just look forward to it. A lot of people I speak to do. They say that they really just love doing weights. And then I was going for a really long walk with my husband once a week for maybe 2.5 hours. We were doing just shy of 10K, but we love it because we just talk. And some of the ideas for the podcast have been birthed through doing these really long walks. And we go all over the city in Melbourne where I'm from. It's fun. And then I thought to myself, okay, I'm doing that. And then after talking to Anne, then I was doing a session a week of boxing, except I wasn't really, I'd done it for such a long period of time, and I kind of wasn't enjoying it as much as I used to. And I thought I need to mix it up a bit. And he was talking about you need to do exercise, a couple of times a week or at least once a week where you're sweating and you're really getting your heart rate up. So after talking to him, I've started with the PT. It's half an hour where we go so hard. Literally I thought I was going to vomit after our first session. But I really enjoy it. It's heart rate is absolutely through the roof, and he'll just go hard doing, rower, and then we're on the ski erg, and then we're running up and down the street and doing this thing and that thing. And I absolutely love it. I love the fact that I get to go hard in that session, and it really, Andy's wisdom changed it for me.
Yeah, I love Andy. I always say he's the Dennis the Menace of science.
Yeah.
He has a playfulness to him, and simultaneously to the reverence and an irreverence to the science.
Yes.
It's sort of let me have the most reverence and really understand it in data, and then be okay, now we're dealing with real life. Yeah. What does that really mean? I think for anyone who hasn't listened to his podcast, I know it's very sciencey, but he's unbelievable. He's
unbelievable. And also Huberman did talk, and I know it's his big thing, but he obviously talks about the morning sunlight, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of the time, I wasn't getting the morning sunlight. I'd be going straight to the studio, or I'm going to the office, or whatever it is. And so many people listened to the episode I did with him and said, I'm now going out into the light in the morning, and, making sure that I don't wear sunglasses in the morning if it, because the light's not as hardcore strong then. Just these little things where I've gone, I want to make that change. And it's not hard to make the change either.
Mm-mm. No, I think what you're saying is so important, because it is not about being perfect. Yeah. It's about these small little tweaks.
Absolutely.
That really change the trajectory of everything.
Totally.
So with work, you're obviously a go-getter. I mean, you're not fooling anyone, Sarah. You're nice, quiet, demure. There's a lot of determination. Yeah. So when you're approaching, so you have your podcast, you got this book, when you have these dreams about what you're in pursuit of, are you ruminating on it kind of every day, going, how's it going? Where do I think I want this to head? Do you kind of just go along for a while and then check in and sort of say, is this going the way I see it? Do I need to strategically reorient this somewhere? How do you approach, your own personal work and career, and next, sort of goal setting?
Yes. Beautiful question. One thing that I do every morning is I go into visualization. So I do meditation, and then for the last bit, I am like visualizing what I want to achieve in my life. So, I do a lot of keynote speaking, but maybe it's doing a TED talk to 10,000 people or whatever it is. Whatever the dreams are that I want to fulfill, they are going in my mind every single morning, and I'm picturing them. And I'm not just picturing them, but I'm actually feeling how good it would be to be doing that. Mm-hmm. And that might be in relationships too. If there's a relationship that I feel is not working well, or maybe it's that forgiving someone for something they did. It's imagining if I want to, be in that relationship again or whatever, maybe it is like forgiving that person, allowing love to come through again. Having that visualization technique, and I know a lot of athletes do that, has changed my life because it makes me feel that I'm in control of my dreams. And I have seen things come to fruition that I've been visualizing. It can take a long period of time. And I think, wow, I've been thinking about this for 3 years and here it is now. And then obviously I put the action in as well. I'm not just visualizing about it and then doing nothing. And so that is how I allow myself to always stay true to the dreams that I want to do. And I think to myself, all right, I'm a mindset coach to a lot of athletes and executives as well. I've got that. I've got the book. I've got the podcast. I've got the public speaking. I've got this brand of like living a life of greatness, and how do we get there to be able to do that? And the more that I pursue, the more that the right people start showing up and doors start opening, and it's a really beautiful thing to see. So those are the techniques and things I do to allow myself to move forward in my dreams.
Do you ever get into a situation where you have these dreams and when you kind of think through them and you hold them for a while, and you think, if that happens, I'm going to be a little busier. Am I ready for that? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
totally.
Where sometimes you go, I might have to, like you did an Australian tour, right?
Yeah,
right?
I did.
Right. So, or is this coming up in October? What do you have coming? You also,
yes, I've got the tour.
Right.
Yeah.
So
October, May of May.
Right. So yes, that's why.
Yeah.
So there's something interesting I get conflicted with, just even with my family, or like I'm dedicated to my routine.
Yeah.
Like to training and sleeping and all these things. Like sometimes that's almost more important than, like last night I landed from a plane in New York and I'm half cocked because it's like 2 days, doing whatever. So do you ever have moments where you go, there's a part of me that really wants this to happen, and am I ready?
Can I be totally honest with you?
Yeah.
No. I think to myself, I am so ready for this. And I think because, some things happen faster than others, but others take years. And through that years of pursuing, you're like really working up to it. And so you get yourself in a state to be so ready for it. I'm like, bring it on. Yeah. Like, I can't wait for this. So I don't think I would put a dream out there if I didn't think I was ready for it. But it's a great, it's an amazing question, because I know a lot of people would, and that holds them back from achieving the dream. Yeah. Because they don't think that they're quite ready for it. Yeah. So
or what it takes.
Yeah, because it takes a lot.
And that's the thing is I think having that alignment with what you're asking for and making sure you're ready to do what that actually takes.
Yes, absolutely. Like even with a podcast, right? And I'm sure you get this asked a lot. People are like, I want to start a podcast, which is amazing. And I say to them, the first thing, it's a lot of work, right? Yeah. I said, if you want to start a podcast, you got to do it properly. And when I say properly, you're going to have to, if you want it to get traction, there needs to be an episode at least out once a week. With that comes research, with getting guests. You got to get mics. You got to get, you want to video them. Otherwise, if you don't have the social media component, it's very hard to grow it. As a producer, I know all these things. And then people are like, oh, okay. Now thinking about that. So you're totally right. With dreams comes work. And it goes back to what we were saying earlier on about you got to hone your craft to be really good at doing something, and knowing that when you get there, it's going to be, usually there's going to take a lot of preparation and a lot of expertise to be able to do it well. Doing public speaking, that's not an easy thing to do. Memorizing a speech, changing it, depending on who you're speaking to. You might have all different types of keynotes that you do, and then actually getting over the nerves to be able to go there and do it. That takes time, but that's okay.
Yeah.
You need that time to be able to become good.
Yeah, and you can take it on in different phases. That's the thing people have to realize. You can do smaller things with less humans, all these different ways of doing it. What has been, when you're creating these goals and these professional and personal goals, because at home you're getting more attention, are you not?
Oh, absolutely.
Right. So I'm always interested when I see somebody who maybe this wasn't part of the original equation.
Yeah.
How has that been for you and your family, and getting praise and criticism, they're getting them both. What has that learning curve been like for you, and what skills have you developed to manage that?
I mean, obviously praise is always nice, right?
But you have to take that with a grain of salt, too.
You take it with a grain of salt, absolutely. Yeah. And being in the public eye, you can meet shady characters. Now I'm very aware of userish energy, where I feel like, are they coming in to use me for something? Or do I feel like it's take and no give? And not that you give to, receive, but sometimes I'm like, I'm not sure. So it's been a really interesting lesson on using my intuition. I think I'm pretty good at discernment, where I can tell very easily, I get where this person's going. I get that they're a good soul. I'm not sure about this person. And, as far as negative feedback's concerned, at the start, that was hard. I'm not going to pretend that it isn't. And it would upset me if I, heard things, but who's giving it? What way are they giving it to you? Because sometimes it's good to listen, right? So if someone's saying, I don't know, something to do with the podcast, but they're saying it and I go, no, I get you. That's actually really good feedback, and maybe I'll change that a little bit, or whatever. I mean, I'm making that up, but whatever it is, that can be very good to take on, but it's very dependent on who it is that's giving the information and the way they're giving the information.
And you could decipher that early without just taking the hit?
Yeah, I think early I took the hit and I was just like, oh my God, why did they say that? Or it'd be a stranger or whatever it is. Someone might write something. More often than not, though, I feel the container that I've made, and I'm sure yours is similar, it's so one of giving knowledge. It's full of love. I'm not doing controversial things or speaking about things that are going to offend or upset people. People that I've attracted to this work that I do are so lovely. Like they really are. That 99% of the time, it is all a really lovely feeling that I get from the community of people that follow me and my work. And I just feel so grateful for that.
I think about that because there's a part of me that's like, hey, I just want to be a part of solutions. That was I wanted to do a show years ago, just call it Solutions. Like we know what all the issues are. Like enough, let's just get to the solutions. But what's funny is all the podcasts I gravitate towards are hosted by people who are willing to offend people. And so part of me, because obviously I have, I have a lot of opinions. And whether I choose to put them on the show or not, I for whatever reason, I've decided to stay focused on the content. But there's a part of me that goes, oh, but the shows I like and the people I really am excited about, they are willing to poke the bear a little bit. And so.
Like who?
Well, my favorite podcast, it's kind of totally juvenile. I said this a lot on the show, is Tim Dillon.
I don't know.
Tim Dillon is a comedian. And if you pay close attention, Tim Dillon's saying a lot of very truthful things. And he's very, very smart. But it's, those people who are willing to be the clown to get the joke across. I mean, obviously I like Joe Rogan too, because he's willing
I love Joe.
to talk about all types of things.
Yeah.
And in one episode be stoned, and then in another episode be talking about the most scientific and important things. And his approach to dealing with COVID and the vaccines and all of that was really willing to have all the conversations. And so I sometimes look at it and think, would you be willing to stick your neck out? Because speaking of COVID, I mean, Australia, they lost their mind. New Zealand,
I was in Melbourne.
New
That
Zealand,
was the most
New Zealand
lockdown
lost
city.
Their mind more. I felt like, but I was like, and in that moment, it's interesting where is it better to serve people and say, hey, we have to really take care of our hearts and be healthy and safe, or be like, wow, we live in an insane place and the people are insane. So I wondered because you are so kind of even. Yeah. Because I can relate to it.
Yeah. If I do have an opinion on something, I definitely will say it. But I'll do it in a way that's kind. And I've learned that. But I understand about how you like those sort of podcasts. I found myself, and this is so different to kind of the work that I listen to a lot and the books that I read, but I found myself listening to a few episodes of Call Her Daddy, right? Alex Cooper. And I'm like, this is awesome. I am loving this.
Yeah.
And there was part of me that was like, oh, that's interesting. And I think it was like I like the turning off, because I'm always turning on, right? I'm always listening to things that are providing me with information or providing me with solutions, or,
it's martini talk.
It's martini talk. And I was like, I'm not such a small talk person. Like, I am quite a deep and meaningful person, but I've listened to a few episodes and I'm like, you know what? That was really good.
Yeah. I think it's a good point. And this goes back to, though, what instrument are we?
Yeah.
And let's just do that really well. And I can appreciate that, other people have a different path. But I was just curious because tonally, it's sort of this very even thing. And I wondered if ever you thought, that's it, I'm taking the machete out and I'm just going to say everything.
Maybe one day, keep listening to the podcast, and maybe one day it'll completely change. But for the moment, there are not a lot of interviews I've done where I think, oh my God, I don't agree at all. Like, that is so wrong. Because I don't think I'd have that type of person on anyway. But, I'll definitely give my opinion to what I think if the person has said something, different. And we have an open conversation about that.
Yeah, open civil discord.
Totally civil discord.
Mm-hmm. You talk a lot about empathy. And I think you've really spent some time about the importance. And we hear words like authentic and empathetic and all those things. But I just was curious, from your perspective, what really empathy, what does it mean to you?
Yeah. Empathy for me is a big thing. And it's something that is just part of who I am. I listen to a story and I'm in the story of that person. Like, you came on my podcast, I'm in the story of your life. You're talking about your children. I don't know at the time what your children look like, but I'm imagining them in my head. I'm playing out the scenario and I'm thinking about the feelings and emotions that you're talking about that relate to the story. And I remember, it's actually one of the best interviews I ever did. It was with a lady called Scarlett Lewis, whose son Jesse died in Sandy Hook. He was in, I think it was grade 1, and he was shot and murdered. And her message was next level, and the way, about forgiveness and what she had to learn about loving kindness. And I mean, it's just the worst thing that can ever happen to someone she went through. And when she was literally talking on the podcast and telling her story, and she was fine and I was a mess. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, she's not shedding a tear, because, she's told the story a lot, and obviously so caring and loving, and I am just crying my eyes out. But thus is life. That was a horrible story, and she's a mother and I am a mother. and I can feel her pain when she's telling the story. And I think having empathy, especially as a podcaster, is so good because it allows you to be able to ask the right questions. It allows you to be able to feel what the person is feeling, and the listeners can feel that as well. I often get told, like, you're a really great listener. And I think empathy comes when you're a good listener because you're really putting yourself in that person's shoes. And I don't look at it as a weakness. I look at it as a strength. And I think it bonds me closer to people, makes me better at my craft. And it also allows me to realize, like, taking it out of the interviewing space, when you have empathy for people, then you realize that everyone's got a story. And you don't know a lot of the time what that story is. So maybe someone wasn't very nice to you that day, or maybe you got cut off in traffic. But what is that person's story that's happened before then, right?
Yeah.
So to just always remember that everyone's got a story and come into the world with that empathetic mindset. And it just allows you, again, to flourish so much more easily.
Do you think, like, for me, I do a good job about staying objective.
Yeah.
Very good. But when it comes to my children and in my partnership, I have a lot less objectivity, right? I'm invested in a very different way.
Yeah.
I can be a great reflective screen, or I can take on someone else's point of view. When it comes to them, I'm wondering, are you able... I've learned, for me, parenting has been a skill that I've just keep working at. So there's a lot of learning that goes on. So clearly the way I listen to my youngest, who is a teenager, versus the first time my oldest went through being a teenager, I'm probably a little better at it.
Yes.
And somebody said one time, a therapist actually, not to get seduced by the facts. And what that means is, and it was very helpful, because especially if you're analytical, or a kid goes through something and it's like, well, what time were you there, and who else was there, and what were they doing? It's like almost none of that matters.
Yeah.
Especially if you go through something heavy, like something happens to one of your kids, is how are they doing? What can you do to help them? How do we get to a place of healing and support? Whatever that is, right? I got very like literal. Well, how'd you get there, and how'd you meet them, and all these things. So I'm wondering, are you able to take that into the relationships that are like the most precious and the ones that were not objective?
It's such a great question. So, again, going back to my daughter, because girls can be, they go through challenging times. And I've spoken to enough child educators. The brain of a girl and a boy are very different. The way they process things, girls develop so much faster. Jealousy comes through faster. It's very full on.
Yeah.
And my daughter will come home, or, when she used to come home and say something happened at school. This one said this, da-da-da. Obviously, it's one side I'm listening to, but I'm the mother. So I think, oh, my God, my poor daughter. Come that night, who's the one staring up at the ceiling, not being able to sleep? Me. She's fast asleep. She's fine. Actually, my husband said to me, look at her. She bounces back in 5 seconds. You're the one that's staring over everything. I'll be like, oh, do you think she's all right? Is she all right when she went to school today? Did she look happy to you? Da-da-da. He's like, she's fine. And I realize how resilient our children are. And I've also spoken to enough child educators to realize that sometimes they need to have these little things in their life, because if they're not building this resilience, it's going to implode when they're older. So having these little things, okay, now I can look objectively. That's all right. If I need to step in, I will, but very rarely do I need to step in. And I can have that empathy to know that there is two sides to every story, and also understand that I don't need to lose sleep. She's going to be okay. And that I parent in a way where it's more about listening rather than trying to give wisdom the whole time. You need to do this, you need to do that, da-da-da. Sometimes you just need to listen, but also I never used to do this until I was speaking to people on the podcast who are the child educators, is allowing them to feel all right for feeling that feeling. So if she's sad, rather than go, don't be sad, it's fine, let's do this, da-da-da, go, I understand that you're feeling sad, and I'd feel sad too if that happened to me, and that's absolutely okay. And you see how they change, because we think that we're trying to like allow them to just quickly move on. Let's not think about that anymore. Let's move on. So I think having that wisdom has allowed me to be more empathetic to situations and not just, take my child, what she's saying, feel so empathetic that I can't deal with anything, but know how to deal with her and, be okay with whoever they're dealing with as well.
Yeah. It's a hard lesson to not try to take away all the suffering, and the suffering is essential.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Sometimes my kids have gotten older, especially one of them in particular. I'm like, oh, maybe she didn't suffer enough. But I'm wondering also, though, how your kids, they don't tell you this, like your kids are going to they are who they are. And some of the traits you would have said like, oh, I hope they have these traits. And some of the traits you'd be like, oh, that's a tough one, and they have those too. When you're faced with the things that really are not in your control, where do you go within yourself to make that okay?
Well, it's funny because my daughter has my exact personality, right? And me when I was younger. So then when I think, why is she ruminating over that? I think, Sarah, that's what you used to do your whole life. And that's okay. And I can teach her the techniques to try and stop that. But if she's still going to get worried, she has to learn as well, right? And then I look at my son, and he's the complete polar opposite of her, right? He's probably like my husband. Cool, calm and collected. He's 11. Nothing is a problem. Just goes to, those people that just like slide through the worlds and they're so wise beyond their years. Yeah. And then, she's that firecracker, but she's me.
Yeah.
So, you've got to just be okay with your child is who they are, and they can learn from example, like we spoke about earlier. I can try and be the best person I can. They can listen to the way that I'm interacting with people. They can listen to the language that I'm using. But, they are still going to be who they are. And if they need help and I can guide them, sure. But I do need to make peace with the fact that they've got their own personalities, and it might not be the ones that I exactly designed for them. So be it.
And, I got deep into thinking about this, which was, and I'm always trying to improve and be better. But when I really think about myself as an adult, externally, I looked very successful by 20. But when did I really start to emotionally probably come to terms with some things about myself? I was probably 31 years old.
Yeah.
So why would I think that a, 15-year-old, like, oh my God, what's wrong with them? It's like, oh, really? Do you want to wind the tape back? You know what I mean? But I just think it's so different as a parent.
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh, I'm sure I had it together. Then it's like, yeah, no, you didn't actually. You want to talk about some of the shenanigans you were up to in your 20s. So I just always, the arc on the story is long.
Yeah.
And just writing that out is.
And also, it's true. And also, it's like kids are kids, right?
Yeah.
Play is an important thing.
Yeah.
We can't, and I think that as an adult too, we can't take life so seriously, right? Like, okay, we're pursuing the job, we're doing this, you've got the exercise, need to do this, but sometimes it's like you got to have fun as well. It's so important. What's the point in being here if we're like taking things so seriously and we don't have that element of fun in our lives?
Yeah. That's also way better. Australian culture does that better.
Yeah.
They take the piss out of things better. They don't take it so serious. In the US, we take everything very serious. It's all very serious. There's so many great other things, but I'm just saying it feels like in Australia, it's a little, that gets sort of reinforced culturally.
Yeah.
So I live with somebody who's like, what are we doing all the time? Like, why are we not having more fun? Like, why are we just not, okay, work hard and have fun. And I'm like, what are you talking about? There's like lists. We've got to do these things, And I see Laird like, is this what we're doing with our lives? And it's really important. You have a lot of, in the bucket of spiritual conversation. And I think sometimes for people, that's just a word. What does that mean? And I was wondering, as based on all, especially the stunning people that you've talked to. What does that mean to you? And is there some type of practice or a way that you get to experience that for you personally?
For me, the meditation has been a big part. So, I mean, when I did that producing role, when I was in radio doing the breakfast producing role, it was so hectic. There was a zillion thoughts going through my mind. And I remember I tried to do meditation and it just, it wasn't working for me. And I thought, there's something wrong with my brain. Seriously, I thought that because I had so many thoughts going and I couldn't even remember them. I was like, when I was in meditation, I was watching them fly past and I was like, what was the other one? What was this one? I was like, wow. It's like the monkey mind we learn. And then when I found meditations that really suited where I was at, and I started meditating and I started Vedic meditation. I love that. It's a mantra. I was like, wow, this is a really beautiful way for me to just get back into sync. And the more I pursued this meditation practice, the more I felt like there was some sort of divinity there too. What that is, I mean, who knows? No one knows. No one has the answer to that. Once we die, if you stay dead, then you'll know the answer. Yeah. I've talked to enough near-death survivors on the podcast to kind of get a bit of a glimpse of what I think goes on. But again, no one really knows. But for me, the art of being in meditation and feeling like I'm connected to everything, that I get to open my heart. And when I open my heart, I can feel the love that maybe we're not as separate as what we think we are and we're all interconnected. And just having those spiritual practices has 100% made me a better person, has brought the most magnificent people into my life. Like, I think that's really important to talk about. When I changed as a person, I went to finding just people that were so amazing. And it just keeps on happening, right? Because I'm a true believer of vibration. If we're all energy, which, apparently we are, then like attracts like, right? So that's a really interesting concept. And if you're showing up and being a good person and being of service and not gossiping and doing all those little things we spoke about, you'll see that your life starts flourishing. So having those sort of spiritual practices in my life, the law of reciprocity, knowing that what I put out will come straight back to me. I see it in action the other day. Like, I was in New York. This is just something so simple, but I think it'll be interesting for people to hear. I was in New York. I was doing this retreat and I met this amazing girl there. And she said, she lived in LA. She goes, what are you doing in LA? I said, I've got a lot of meetings, got to do X, Y, and Z. She goes, well, we're like, where are you going? And I said, I've got to go this place and this place, this place. She goes, wow, you realize LA, everything's really far apart. And I'm like, I really don't know. Like, I haven't been there for 10 years. She goes, you've got a meeting here and here and here. You're literally traveling all around LA in one day. This was the other day. And I was like, oh, okay. She goes, you know what? I'm not doing anything on Monday. I'm happy to drive you. I'm like, are you joking? She goes, yeah, absolutely. I'll pick you up from your house. I'll plot out how long it's going to take. She bought a packed lunch and literally this gorgeous girl, her name is Jordan. She actually was in the water polo team for America. She just played in the US in the Olympics for the US.
So you had protection and
I
a driver?
had protection, and it was hard for her because Australia actually beat them and took them out of the finals. So I was like, please understand that I didn't really follow this. It's not me.
Not a fan, yeah.
And she drove me around LA for a day. But things like that happen to me, as I'm sure they do for you, because I'm giving back. I'm giving out information to people. I'm doing good things. And so things open and good things happen to me too, because I believe in that law of reciprocity. Yeah. What we put out comes straight back. So really, spirituality has made my life a lot more fulfilling. And it's not in a way that there's a guru out there and I'm going and I'm laying at the feet and this and that. No, that's not the way. I mean, a lot of people do that and that's okay. But for me, it's just having these beautiful practices, the visualization, being deep in meditation, there might be some prayers that I do, but they're not religious prayers. It might be more kind of mantras or gratitude. That's a prayer within itself that I do in the morning after I do meditation, and making sure that I show up as a good person. And they've really, I don't know where I'd be without it.
Have you had to learn to receive, or is that easy for you?
Look, it hasn't been as hard as what I thought it would. And I think I've built up the confidence now where I've thought that, no, you deserve to be able to receive all the love. You deserve to be able to receive what is coming your way, and that's okay, but be grateful for it. Yeah. Right? And I've got friends that keep me in check. Sometimes I might be complaining about something to do with work, and my best friend will say, do you realize how far you've come in such a short period of time? And I forget about that. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. She goes, don't look at other people, what they're doing. And I mean, 101. But sometimes you need to hear it from a friend.
Yeah.
Look at what you're doing and how far you've come in your journey. And I mean, that's true for everyone.
Yeah. Do you see the U.S. market, and this is a curiosity, and I know you're kicking the market's ass over there. Are you on a mission to sort of get into some domination in the U.S.?
I mean, I wouldn't mind. I've got my second biggest audience outside of Australia is the US. Yeah. And it's because I've had so many Americans on the podcast, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I adore Americans. I adore English people. I adore everyone. If you've got a good message, then those are the sort of people that I want. But I do also understand that you guys are leading the way when it comes to personal development and wellness. And we have a lot of that stuff back home. We don't have the population that you have.
Right. We have the population, but actually the fitness, some of the fitness components out of Australia is
very true.
Is very good.
Yeah. And sport is a big part of Australian culture. So, because of the climate, not so much in Melbourne where I live sometimes, but it allows for that. So, you even see at the Olympics, like we just did so well, where our population is smaller than California.
Oh, yeah.
But the fact that we got up there and showed up is because all those things, like from a young age, I was telling this girl who drove me, I said, I played water polo because it was like compulsory at school. Right. And a lot of people don't have that kind of stuff, but we're given it, and we all are taught to swim, and it's like mandatory. So, Australia absolutely kicks goals, and I love Australia. It's one of the most wonderful places to live.
The only thing is everything can kill you there. Oh my gosh. Like your spiders and some of the stuff you guys have there is wild.
I know, it's wild. I was even thinking the other day, because like koalas and wombats and platypuses, like kangaroos, they're like second nature, right? But then a taxi driver was talking about kangaroos, and I'm like, yeah, they kick you, you're dead.
Yeah.
Like they're full, and it's not like they're in my backyard, but you go out to the countryside and they're everywhere, right? But America is so wonderful. Like I was just in New York for a week, and oh my God, the hustle and bustle just lit me up more than anything. I swear to God, I was like, this place is alive. And LA is not dissimilar to Melbourne in like it's beautiful. A lot of people have beautiful places to live. They've got more space.
Yeah.
And there's beautiful places to eat and this and that. But the American market is one that I've always loved, and they've been very kind to me.
Is California your biggest state for listening, or New York?
I think it's both.
Yeah. I'd be curious.
Yeah, actually, that is a good question, and I have looked before. I reckon whatever it is, they're like one is just in front of the other one. And then you get the weird...
Like Oklahoma.
Or you get random, like there's some person in Africa at some place where you think like, do they even listen to podcasts there that's listening? Or, it's interesting when you can see that data.
I know. And what about that aspect? Because you're foolish, not you, a person is foolish to think I'll be prepared, I'll do all my homework, I'll get great guests. The consideration of the algorithm and technology. Yeah. So how have you tackled that as part of your business? Because whether someone's doing a podcast or selling, scalp conditioner, that is now a part of everyday business. So how have you kind of sharpened your teeth and gotten informed and worked on that side of it?
As far as getting what's going on.
Oh, just the YouTube and the clips and the algorithms and all that. I know, that's how I feel.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But it's interesting because with podcasting, it goes everywhere, right? So sometimes people will talk to me and I'm like, it's not just in Australia. You realize like Apple Podcasts and Spotify are like everywhere, right? So even someone the other day was saying, how did I find out about you? And they looked for a guest. And then my podcast came up and I was like, wow, like Spotify and Apple Podcasts are really like working for me in that sense, because even if they don't know who I am, they've looked at a certain guest, they've discovered the podcast, and then hopefully I've kept them on as a listener for the other episodes. And then what's been a really good thing, and you do this as well, is like we video the content. And so when you collaborate with someone, then their audience sees you. And that's a great way to be able to share information and allow, your audience to see their work and their audience sees your work. So Instagram and, Facebook and all the other different tools that allow those collaborations has been a really great part in allowing the audience to grow. A big part of podcasting is word of mouth, and I feel like, okay, this person that spoke to this person, they're now listening, and that adds up over time. So
do you have the patience for that?
Not for those little things, but obviously.
Oh my gosh. The technology part.
I know. The technology part is very hard. And sometimes, like even the other day, I was like, really, the social media component is wearing me thin. And because I'm here, I'm like thinking of, okay, the time zone's here, the time zone's there. I got to post at this time because the Australian audience is my biggest and it's this time there. And I was like, I don't have the time to do this really.
Yeah.
But you know what? When you're actually doing that in, day out, or, you don't have to do it every day, but if you're consistent, it's going to make your podcast grow.
Yeah. That's right. And I think that's the important point is it all takes time. Some people are unicorns.
Yeah.
Something happens, call her daddy. You mentioned them.
Yeah.
Obviously Huberman. These are very specific. These are unicorn scenarios. But to remind people that if you're doing good work, you will find an audience.
100%.
Yeah. So this book, before we go on to the book again, you talked about changing your own lens. I just want to kind of go towards this part of it because I feel like that's everything in life, right? It is everything is in our minds. So you talked about doing that and changing your own lens. Do you think it's possible? Is it an over time thing, or is it, hey, this isn't working, and you just say, I'm going to make a shift, and you find the way to make that shift?
Well, I was always, again, and it was completely because I was trying to protect myself in the way that I grew up. It was a worst case scenario. So I would rather think the worst thing will happen, because then if it does, I'll be okay. And we do that to protect ourselves. We don't realize that doing that is not going to be good for yourself. Or if you're a spiritual person, you may think that you're attracting that to you, right? So why wouldn't I go in with the mindset of it's going to be okay? What if flying on that plane, what if everything was okay? What if going to that job interview, what if everything was okay? What if I looked at life like that? And it's not trying to just do positive mindset and then not having a realistic view of life, but showing up with that in mind. You're going to put your best foot forward because you're not going to be scared, but also knowing whatever happens, happens, right? But I gave it the best shot that I could, rather than I went there with so much fear, or I was already thinking I'm not going to get the job. So when I went into that job interview, I didn't perform at the maximum that I could have, because in the back of my mind, I was thinking that maybe someone else would get it. And I thought like that to protect myself. What if you didn't think like that? And that blew down all the doors for me.
Yeah.
Right? Always going in with that. What if it was going to be okay? What if it was okay? And then the next door opened, and then the next door opened. But doing that with everything in life.
Yeah.
And it takes repetition, right? And we know this from neuroscience. If you want to rewire the brain, you've got to consciously be aware of what you're thinking. And then, okay, is that belief true? Do I know that for sure? There's a lot of Byron Katie's work, right? You know, she's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, do you know that 100%? Do you know that to be true? And if you do know that to be true, what's the radical acceptance that you're going to give? Okay, it's true. Can I do something about it? If I can, then I will. And if I can't, so be it.
Yeah.
And move on.
Yeah.
So all those kind of things allowed me to show up in a different way and allowed me, again, to be that person that I suppose was a better version of me, a happier version of me. And I'm sure that a lot of people were attracted to a lot more than the older version of me.
I really appreciate that. And I think, you know, it's funny, you don't want to focus on outcome and you don't want to have expectation, but there is something to be said for like, this could be great.
Yeah.
And we're not trained like that. It's like, well, we'll see. And you know, it's all that. Okay. I'm going to ask you a question that just dawned on me because I feel like you can answer it. And I'll give you an example. So when I review myself, because I'm trying to, you know, do better, just do better.
Yeah.
The one zone is the parenting. And even as a wife, right? Like there's things about me I know because I seem not preoccupied. I'm very present, but also I'm also a lot in my mind. And I think for my children and for my husband, sometimes there's a consistency that comes with that. So they benefit on this one side. But I often think if we go through our lives and I ask my adult children, what was something that was tricky to navigate about me? It would be that like she was there and super solid and always there, but then she also was sometimes because with that kind of balance and objectivity sometimes comes a far awayness because you're trying to work it out.
Yeah.
So I wondered, and I'm always working on that, like trying to come out and just be messy and human and like emotional. But then how do I maintain that even so if the wheels are coming off, I'm still like, okay, we're going to work it out. I wonder for you as somebody who, you know, you're put together. You are, even in saying like, oh, I'm going to work on, because when somebody can say, I worry and that's my tendency and I'm working on that, but still with that objectivity, that's a dangerous person. I can relate to that because you can say, yeah, here I'm not doing so great and I'm going to work on it. And when I say it's dangerous is because the self-awareness, but then yet the objectivity at the same time is wild to live with.
Absolutely.
Right. So I wonder, because like I said, I feel like you can answer it. When your kids are older and they have all the great things to say about you, what will be the thing that they'll say, and maybe even your partner, that this was something sort of like a really interesting thing to try to navigate about you?
I think for me, that's a really interesting question that, I mean, I think I'm pretty good at this now, but for a period of time, I very much was caught up in my head, very much caught up in my head. So much so where the chatter would be so loud that I didn't even realize that it was there and you'd go quiet. You know, that happens where you're just thinking so much and you're not consciously aware of what you're thinking that it just, gets it taken away. And I feel like, again, I worked through this, but that was a long period of my life where I was just always in my head. And I mean, how much are we enjoying life when we're just so worried about it? I hope my kids were too young and they don't remember that. And my partner will remember that.
But I'm sure you can appreciate, that's the other thing cool about being in a partnership, or if you can stay together, is you can also really look and go, whoa.
Yeah. They've got so much better.
And that's stuff that you really admire.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think anyone that's going to work on themselves, I think that's an amazing thing to be able to do and to take that step to go, I don't really love all the aspects of me right now, and I'm going to find information out to be able to change that. And that's, you've done a lot in your life. I completely did that, but I had to because I was thrown into a crisis. I didn't have to. I could have chosen not to and walk through that different door, but I chose to, and it was life-changing. Am I always 5-star at everything I do? Absolutely not. And I it's interesting. I can't remember who it was. There was like, a spiritual person on the podcast, and I said, sometimes my girlfriends and I, who are very into personal development work, we wonder if like you can regress. And they're like, no, once you know something, you know it. You can't, if you've done the work, it's there, right? And I thought that was so interesting, and also like, thank God, because sometimes we're not perfect. Sometimes the worry does come through, or the negative thoughts do come through, and sometimes they get overwhelming. But now I have the techniques and the tools to be able to know how to take them away, even with the breathing. If I get on a plane now and I feel like my heart is going funny, then I know how to breathe myself into it changing. And that's what the book is. Living a Life of Greatness has those different chapters to allow people to read it, empower their life to be able to make the changes that I made, because it's a journey. I mean, do we ever get to the destination? No. Life is the journey. And why wouldn't we just try and enjoy every step of that? Because there ain't no outcome that we come to and that we're like, wow, I've got it all worked out, and now the next 20 years is going to be perfect. Life's not like that. It's the dichotomy of the dark and the light. And even when you have the most perfect life, it throws something at you, right? Because we're here to learn. That's what I'm a believer of. But when you learn and you've got these tools in place, you can come back from those dark periods so much faster. So when something would happen to me, I would used to stir on that for weeks or months. And now that I have the tools in place, I come back from that bad place a lot faster. So, I think my kids and my husband would probably say that, I have been in my head at times, but, they would see that I was a lot better at coming out of that than what I used to be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What about when you're driven? Because you're driven.
Yeah.
And goal-oriented. No, I like it.
Yeah.
That's a calibration too. So how are you using that for your good? Yeah. The good for you, for your life? Because I think that's where people, that too in itself is a dance.
Totally. And there can be suffering that comes from that as well.
Yeah.
And what I am learning is to let go. And I find that hard because I was a producer, and I have the background of like pursuing, getting what you need to get. Great. Getting the next thing, doing this, doing that. Wow, tick, tick, tick. And so I'm amazing at that. I'm amazing at getting guests. I got the podcast down pat. And even though I have producers and stuff, I am still leading the way with that. But when I need to let go, I find that a lot harder. Okay, I've put it out there. Now just release and not think about it. Don't worry about if they're going to get back to you, if they're not. Just, you've tried. Now it's time to let go. And a lot of people I speak to who are in roles like you and they find it hard, right? Because it's very hard to be one sort of personality and then try and do the other bit of the personality, right? So there's a beautiful middle ground, and I'm pursuing that every day. And am I getting better at it? I definitely think so. But it still can sometimes be a struggle. It's a dance.
Yeah. No, it is. And I think reminding people that sometimes we're one way and we're always going to be working on the other.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Totally.
I did that 2.5% better today, and that is always happening. And I think what happens is we're trying something and we think we quote failed, and we don't realize those things are living together the whole time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's okay.
Yeah, it is.
Did
you read your book for audio?
I am going to read it. So it will be available in audio.
Okay, good. Well, that'll be great. So are you excited about this?
I'm so excited. Honestly, like, you know, obviously, because you've written a few books, like you go through this, you write the book, then you give it to the publisher, go through the editing process, and you have to read it what you think is like 5,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
And by the end, that book back to front, obviously. I am so proud of this book. And it's interesting, I interviewed Elizabeth Gilbert on my podcast, and she was talking about Eat, Pray, Love and how initially, that was way before social media and stuff. And she goes, initially it did like okay, but not the extreme of what it is now. But it was this book that people bought. The mum bought it. She then bought it for the friend and the daughter. And it just was like, that's how it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And, I hope that my book is a similar thing in the sense that people get so much out of it that they buy it for their friends or their family, whoever it is. I'm proud of it. And it's my story. And it can be scary to tell your story sometimes. And when you do a podcast, like you tell information, but sometimes you leave bits out as well because there is like a fine line, right? And I feel with this book, for me, there's just a lot of information in there that I've never spoken about before. And I put it in there in a way that I hope it changes other people's lives and that they can pursue their own life of greatness through the lens of what I have witnessed in mine that has allowed me to flourish.
Yeah. It's writing it down is different than speaking it. I'll be interested. I'd love to talk to you after you read it to see what that felt like. When you have to read it off the page.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting.
Well, it's so funny. So the acknowledgements is like a big deal. If you remember that. And like when I was writing the acknowledgements, I was very thoughtful about what I was writing, as like the whole book is. And then I wrote this couple of lines about my dog. I was an absolute blubbering mess. And I read it out to my family, the acknowledgements, and I got to Lola, my 15-year-old miniature schnauzer, and there I could not stop crying. So when this is out, I'm sure the audiobook will have been done, but I hope I held it together for that bit.
Was your husband like, what the hell?
Yeah, I know. So funny.
Oh my gosh. Well, the dog's been with you through the whole thing.
Totally. Yeah. And she's sleeping at my feet the whole time. She's the one that's home with me all day.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if there's any last invitation from all the conversations and continued conversations that you're going to have that you just would want to remind the listener that just is showing up for you today.
I think really living a life of greatness comes with these pillars, but the ones that are the most important is like we spoke about it, like show up as your authentic self. That will help you so much in life. Be kind whenever you can. Open your heart, choose love. Forgiveness is a huge key to anything, and that can be one of the most challenging things we have to do in life. But what I learned was that forgiveness is not about the person that hurt you. It's about allowing yourself to be free, right? When Scarlett Lewis used forgiveness, it was for her because she didn't want to suffer for the rest of her life. And I think that is just such a big part of living a great life. And also being able to do something that helps others because, as I mentioned, we're all just trying to help each other on each other's journeys. And as Ramdas said, walk each other home.
Yeah. And I always think it's interesting that in a way we want to be forgiven and we hope to be forgiven. And so I know it's hard to do because it's scary, but it is really powerful. And once you learn to forgive someone, I think that practice gets easier and easier.
Absolutely.
Now, it doesn't mean you have to hang out or be best friends.
No.
And that's something else. That's not what that means. It's not like, someone saying, okay, you've transgressed me in a way and now I forgive you and we're best friends. It just means I forgive you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it means that now you're not in jail anymore.
Yeah.
You can walk through the it's that Rumi quote about why leave yourself in jail when the door is wide open.
Yeah.
And forgiveness is that.
Yeah. And so
Allowing
is worry.
yourself to be free. Yeah.
Oh, so is worry. The background of your podcast, like you're in the stars, in the space.
Oh,
What was that? I was like, she's getting wild over here.
That was, I think so I came up with the artwork for the podcast, and then when the company that I licensed my podcast to, they got these beautiful new studios, and we had to work out, like every podcast has to work out what their artwork was going to be. And marketing sent me that. And I was like, I quite like that. And then the guy's like, I can animate it and the stars can be shooting. And I was like, wow, now that is cool. And that's how it came about.
Yeah.
And it always gets comments from people like, wow, look at those backgrounds of that.
No, it's kind of wild.
Yeah.
Like we're in the spaceship with you.
Absolutely.
It's kind of probably closer to reality anyway.
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
we are, in the spaceship for sure. Well, listen, Sarah, congratulations on the success of your show and the continued success, and congratulations on doing a book. And if people want to listen to it or find it, they can obviously find it on Amazon.
Yes.
Is there any other place you want to direct them?
The podcast is A Life of Greatness, and you can get that on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Living a Life of Greatness. Amazon is a perfect place to purchase it, and look for it on Spotify and Audible, as far as if you want to listen to the audio part.
Yeah, and we want to hear you cry about Lola.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you for your time, and thank you for coming up to my house and just on your way home back to Australia.
Gabby, thank you so much.
You.
This has been so much fun. Thank you for welcoming me into your home. Thank you for the beautiful coffee. Gabby made me coffee. I was a little bit worried because I've had some bad coffees. This was the most delicious coffee. I got to sit on that chair.
Yeah, we hypnotized you.
Yeah, I met Led. He was hilarious. I was like, this has been a really fun day.
Well, it's just beginning for you. So I'm really happy for your success, and I wish you obviously continued success. And I really appreciate your quiet and yet very tenacious spirit. Thank you,
Gabby. Thank you so much. Love to you and all the beautiful work that you do. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks. Thanks everyone for spending some time with me. Hopefully you got something out of it. If you did, feel free to share it with your friends, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And also, I want to hear from you. Tell me what's working, what's resonating with you, and how you're getting it done. Keep going.